Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the Huff Family Fund for 2026. Very glad to be joined by all of you this morning. My name is Jillian Armstrong. I am the Grants and Communications Manager for the County Foundation. For those who maybe are unfamiliar with us, the County Foundation is the community foundation for Prince Edward County. We are part of a network of over 200 community foundations across Canada. And we're very proud to serve our communities. And I'm so excited this morning to talk to you a little about the Huff Family Fund. So I'm going to kick things off now. So we're just going to start with, introductions and agenda of what we're going to cover this morning. It'll probably be around half an hour of a lot of me talking. And then from there on, we're going to end with a Q&A. So save your questions till the end. As you're thinking of them, feel free to jot them down. And then we'll cover those at the end. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement. I'll go over an overview of what is the Huff Family Fund, matching funds, program details and eligibility, application overview, how to write a strong grant application for the Huff Family Fund, adjudication and criteria, timelines, and then, as mentioned, we'll have a little Q&A at the end. So in this case, I'm just going to start, jumping in, and we'll go from there. So if anyone has joined previously for our webinars on the Huff Family Fund, we'll cover some similar things that I've spoken about previously, but I am going to include some new content for anyone who is joining once again. So we're going to start this morning with the land acknowledgement. So the County Foundation acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. These peoples agreed to mutual sharing obligations and responsibilities as stewards of the land and water. We recognize that these are now our shared obligations, working in partnership with our current neighbors, the Mohawk Bay of Quinte peoples. So the reason that we're here this morning, what is the Huff Family Fund? So the Huff Family Fund is one of our donor-advised funds with the County Foundation. And I'll kind of explain a little bit about what that is specifically, because a lot of people are unfamiliar. So a donor-advised fund essentially is a fund that is established through us at the County Foundation. So in a lot of cases, you're probably familiar with the idea of a family foundation. If you're familiar with the Parrott Foundation from Belleville, and I'm sure there's, lots of other community foundation or family foundations that you've heard of before. And traditionally, those are established by a family or a specific donor. But along with that process, they have to, have a board, sometimes staff to be able to coordinate and administrate the foundation itself. So establishing a donor-advised fund is actually a little bit more straightforward because the County Foundation is then the ones who take on the administrative load in terms of being able to help with those grant disbursements, help with the adjudication process. So that's kind of our role. So we have a lot of different donor-advised funds at the County Foundation, but the Huff Family Fund is unique because it's a donor fund that also does open calls for applications. So it's an open process, anyone that can apply to it. But I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit that background about what it is, because it is a little bit unique and not everyone's familiar with what a family fund would look like, especially at a community foundation. So the Huff Family Fund was established in 2017 and launched in 2018. It focuses on projects and programs based in Prince Edward County, serving Prince Edward County people, so our residents. This makes sense. Obviously, as a community foundation, we're focused on our local community. The Huff Family Fund specifically supports programs with a focus in addiction and mental health, animal welfare, arts and culture, healthcare and human services, housing issues, and vital signs priority areas, including education and learning, food security, and transportation. So that's just a little bit of background. So as you can see, it's really diverse in the sectors that it serves. The Huff Family Fund is also a matching grant. So for anyone who has not applied to the Huff Family Fund previously or is unfamiliar with matching funds, it is an application process where it must be whatever you are requesting funding for must also be matched with either existing other funds or volunteer hours. So the example that I've highlighted here is that if you are putting in a request for $5,000 for the Huff Family Fund, that must be either matched with $5,000 in other funding or volunteer hours. And sometimes that can be also a mix of both. So in some cases, you have a mix of volunteer hours with also additional funds to make up that difference. In terms of, just straight cash funding, that can either look like external funding. So that's either funding that you are receiving through donations, through sponsorships, through other foundations, other grants. So you can list that. Or sometimes, in some cases, depending on what type of organization you have, you might have other revenue streams from sales or from other programs that you run that you get revenue from, in which case you can also include your own internal funds as well. There's no stipulation for the Huff Family Fund in terms of how much of your own funds that you need to kind of contribute towards that, if that is the route that you're going. Some matching funds will ask specifically for you to kind of show that you have a little skin in the game, but we are happy to either, show other external revenues that you have, or if you have some of your own. And then volunteer hours. So this is the one that's always a little bit more complicated to explain. So how do you actually calculate volunteer hours depending on what your request is related to? So you have to think about it as though you were paying someone to do this role. So what you would do is you would look at the, volunteer position and think to yourself, what would be the, hourly wage for this role if we were to pay someone to do those duties. And then you would look at the number of hours that person is volunteering. So for example, maybe you have someone that you would normally pay $18 an hour for this type of role that they're filling. And then you go, okay, well, they are going to be contributing X number of hours. So you would just do those calculations, and that's how you would arrive at the total amount of volunteer hours as part of that matching funding. The overall project in the above example would be $10,000. So that would be the total cost of the initiative or project or program or whatever you're applying for. And then $5,000 would be the request to the Huff Family Fund, and $5,000 in matching funds. The matching funds and volunteer hours must be verifiable, included in your application. So ideally, you would have confirmed funding. As part of that, it also just strengthens your application to know that those funds are confirmed. And then, for example, if we had to do an investigation, that we were able to show that, yes, those funds do exist and that they are confirmed. And then lastly, just a little bit of clarification. So in terms of volunteer hours, it also needs to be specific to the request itself. So volunteer hours would not include something like, a board of directors or sort of like general volunteer force that's unrelated to the project. So, board of directors in particular, that's considered a part of the organization's required governance structure for a registered charity. So something like that would just not be eligible in that case. Okay, program details. So in terms of the Huff Family Fund for 2026, the total funding available is $250,000. No individual grant will exceed $30,000. However, you can apply for both single-year grants and multi-year. So for single-year grants, you can request up to $30,000. And for multi-year grants, you can request up to $30,000 for 3 years. So up to $10K per year. And lastly, if you're awarded multi-year funding, an annual report is required before a subsequent year's funding is advanced. Eligibility. So you must be a qualified donee as defined by the Income Tax Act, or working in partnership with a qualified donee under which funds will flow and the project will be managed. So qualified donees, most cases that will be a registered charity. There are also, some other examples, including, schools, universities, things like that. So obviously not as many of those applying to this particular program. And if you're working in partnership with a qualified donee, so you yourself are either a nonprofit or a community organization and you don't have charitable status, you can partner sort of that fiscal partnership with a registered charity. But you also must include a partnership letter as one of the supplementary documents included with your application. And so what that would look like is that it's typically like a standard letter that you and the charitable partner sign that clarifies, here's what the partnership looks like. So here's like the timelines of it's going to be from this state to this state. Here's who is responsible for what duties as part of this, program that you are partnering on, and just kind of provides a bit of clarity. So if anyone has questions about that, or like examples, there's lots available online, but also feel free to write to me afterwards and we can kind of go over that a little bit more in depth. And lastly, and most importantly, projects and organizations must support the residents of Prince Edward County. Eligible projects. So this is what you are able to apply for support for through the Huff Family Fund. So this includes, and it's also in order of, priorities, expansion of service or creation of new programming project that allows the organization to do more for their target group. Inputs to allow projects to serve. So this would include, purchase of animal food to improve animal welfare, or food to support cooking classes for a vulnerable sector. Projects that educate and support sectors of the community in need. Evaluation of an existing project organization to position further funding possibilities, small capital projects, facility improvements that build organizational capacity to better serve, and lastly, ongoing operational costs in unique or certain circumstances. Now we're going to kind of do a little bit of an overview of what is asked within the actual application. So these are the details that you will need to provide along with your submission. So this includes your organization's information, funding request details. So as mentioned, you can apply for single year or multi-year support. The project description. So what are you applying for? What are you hoping to do in the community? How will the Huff Family Fund grant help your project? And I always like to clarify this question a little bit because, if we were just to do like a straightforward answer of how will the Huff Family Fund grant fund your project, it's like, well, it would give us the funding to allow us to do the thing that we want to do. But we really, with that question, are asking to talk about like beyond just the funding, what is the challenge or opportunity that this grant will allow you to address? Community need. So what is the need in the community? What are you hoping to address as part of that? And this is the section where you can include more stats and data to kind of really amplify your proposal about, what the needs are that you're hoping to meet. And lastly, schedule and timelines. So going over kind of like what are your key dates and timelines for the initiative. And next up, we will ask about the objectives of what you are applying for support for. And in this section, what I wanted to encourage is to focus less on just outputs. So those would be deliverables, so the things that you're, hoping to do, versus outcomes impact. So outputs, an example would be, we're running a workshop on X activity, but as part of those objectives, you also want to speak to the impact and how you will know that something has changed. Like, what are you hoping to achieve as part of that? So I always want to clarify that impact is a big part of that, in addition to just stating what you're hoping to do. We'll also ask about recognition, so how you plan to recognize the Huff Family Fund. And, I throw ourselves in there just because particularly for our donor advised funds, making sure that people know that the funding came through the county foundation. This encourages other donors to work with us and can amplify the amount of grants that we're able to provide in our community. So anywhere that you are recognizing the Huff Family Fund, the expectation is that you would also recognize the County Foundation and make it clear that there's a relationship there. Budget, classic for any grant application. We're going to ask, for the budget of what you're hoping to do. And for budgets, greatest success are with clear budgets with realistic requests. And by realistic, that's going to depend entirely on what you're hoping to apply for support for. But what I always like to clarify is that, sometimes with grant applications, if there's up to 30,000 available in funding, some people will ask for that full amount just because they're like, well, I just hope to get as much as I possibly can. But within a budget, being able to kind of have that specificity behind it just shows that it's very intentional what you're applying for support for, and to have that clarity. So that's always an important part of this. I'd also encourage, with any budget, to link the budget needs to the impact. So an example of what that might look like is clarifying, this request will, or expense item will allow us to serve X number of people, and to really kind of link those two things together, because it also just makes it a bit more tangible for an adjudication committee to kind of understand what the request is and what those budget needs are in order to kind of fulfill the vision that you're hoping to do. And lastly, it's also helpful to clarify exactly where the matching funds are coming from. Again, this is a matching grant, so we want to be able to see that as part of your budget, and also to clarify that that funding is confirmed. Okay, and then financial statements. As part of this, we'll also ask for your most recent copy of your financial statements. And then lastly, final reports. So this is not actually part of the application form, but if you have received previous support through the Huff Family Fund, have you fulfilled all your reporting needs? And if you have not submitted your final request or final report for the Huff Family Fund from any previous funding, making sure that you're getting in touch with us to provide an update on how things are going so far if the due date has not passed yet. Okay. So now we're going to move on to a little bit of like a more general part of this, which is tips for grant writing. So this is something that I think is not just, applicable to the Huff Family Fund, but is applicable to all grants that you would be applying for. You want to make sure that you're reading the guidelines carefully, and then you're going to read them again, especially when you're doing a first scan of things. Sometimes there's things you miss. And, it's helpful to look through those guidelines also with the request that you're imagining in your mind as well, to make sure that it aligns with the grant program. There's nothing worse than, having a fully fledged idea, going back and then realizing, oh, shoot, and actually this wasn't as in line with the grant program as I thought it was. This part is ineligible. Just clarifying those kinds of things. It's always just super helpful. Plan to submit early and always save a copy of your application. So as part of the application form online, there is an option to be able to save your work as you go along. But I always, always, always recommend that you save an external copy. So whether that's, you're keeping it in Word or your notes somewhere else, there's nothing worse than assuming that, technology is bulletproof. You want to make sure that you always have a backup copy, because no one likes that feeling when you go back to something and realize, oh, it didn't save and it didn't save properly and it's missing this part and I did all that work. So don't make that mistake. Always make sure that you're saving a copy, and making sure that you're planning to submit early. Again, technology is not bulletproof. Sometimes things happen. Power outages go out. We're in the county, so internet issues. So being, cognizant of that and making sure that you have a plan to submit even just like a few days early can make a big difference. And also just gives you that peace of mind that, it's in and you're not panicking in the last hour trying to get something in. So that's always my suggestion. And always double check the due date is another big tip. So as part of that, If you submit early, then there's no concern about, running into any issues with the deadline to apply. Uh, Use clear and concise language in your application. So what I always like to clarify when we're thinking about kind of like how to know like what is clear, what is concise, like what does that mean? Uh, I think like if you were quickly reading your own application, would you be able to scan and go quick hits? I understand the full picture of this request. And the reason I say that is because, particularly with adjudication committees, they're reading a lot of applications and like have to keep a lot of things in their minds. And they go in like application by application. But after a while, you want to be able to have like that clear understanding right from the jump of what this request is and why you're looking to get support for it. So that is always my suggestion. Use bullet points, be, concise with your language. All of those things are going to be to your advantage because I feel like with any, grant process, if you make it easy on the adjudicators to understand and to grasp quickly, then you're going to set yourself up for success, especially when referencing back to that application and being like, okay, they made all the information really clear and available to us. It wasn't buried in too much information. Applications should highlight the impact for PEC residents, be specific about the need and the benefit to our community. So this is obviously a really, really key part of applying to the Huff Family Fund. As I mentioned, for Community Foundation, we are hyper local in our focus. We are here to support the organizations that are, ingrained in our community, are consistently providing services here to the benefit of Prince Edward County residents. So being able to show that history and that integration into our community is a really key part of this. And ultimately, we're here to support PEC organizations as well, like to make sure that we are available to support them. So I just want to clarify, like if you are a larger organization, that's fine, but you want to be able to show that you have like a local chapter, that you have a really clear like boots on the ground program that is having an impact here in our community. So again, happy to chat about that like offline, but you really want to be able to show here's the impact for the PEC residents that we're serving. Lastly, well, not lastly, but be careful how you use tools like AI to assist with grant writing. And this is something that I've started to incorporate in my tips just because AI has, taken over, the internet, the world, and unfortunately in a lot of cases, but it is a tool that a lot of people are using more and more. And my caution with it is that your voice should be the one that shines through. As we are becoming more and more familiar with AI and what it sounds like and what it writes like, we are noticing the trends, particularly in grant submissions of like, oh, well, that sounds like a robot wrote it, or we recognize that this is likely been run through ChatGPT or one of the other tools, and it doesn't leave a great taste in your mouth because ultimately with any grant. This is something that matters to you. You're looking to do something in the community. And we want to support projects that you are passionate about. And so we want your passion, your voice to shine through as part of that grant application. So if you're going to use a tool like that, just make sure that you're using it sparingly to help give you inspiration to kind of spark ideas, but it isn't writing the entire application. Because let me tell you, like we can start to see through that now, the more familiar that we become with it. And again, it's gonna do a disservice to what you're applying for. And then lastly, use your resources. We're always happy to help. So Dominique and I, like if you're familiar, with our staff, we are here as a resource for you guys. We are here to provide advice and feedback. I'm even happy to read applications in advance of being submitted. Granted, if they're not, provided to me within the few days right before the deadline. because that's usually when I get a storm of different questions and inquiries. But if you provide enough space and time, like I'm happy to kind of provide that hands-on feedback, and also to have private meetings and discussions, phone conversations as you're thinking of ideas or things that you want to uh, run by us. We are accessible, and so please make sure that you are using us as much as you would like to. Okay, and then as part of sort of general tips for grant writing, I did want to include a slide around expectations and planning. So how do you plan for a grant that you have not received yet? And as part of this, my recommendation is don't build your budget around a grant you haven't received yet. Uh, Treat grant funding as an opportunity and not a guarantee. And I say that with love because I know it's really tough, especially when you're kind of trying to piece together all these different pieces of funding. But even if you have received support through the Huff Family Fund previously, there's no guarantee that's going to happen every time. Luckily, like the Huff Family Fund is a great opportunity. It is the largest bucket of funding that we have available for one of our public programs. Which is really amazing. The Huff Family Fund, the Huffs have been so generous with Prince Edward County, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. So there are many different ways of getting support through the County Foundation. So if you're familiar with the Municipal Community Grants Program, with our Vital Impact Fund, through our donor funds, so we have a new expression of interest form for receiving support for local organizations serving Prince Edward County. So there's a lot of different ways to get support. So even if you're going into, this program, it's kind of the chessboard of sometimes you're going to get support through, Huff. Sometimes you're going to get support through the PC Arts Fund. Sometimes you're going to get support through one of our donor funds. But there's no guarantee with any of those. And so what we want is to be able to offer an array of different ways to get support. But don't be disheartened if Huff Family Fund or another one of our programs doesn't always end up with an approval. It's not a reflection on your work or the impact that you have on the community. Sometimes that's just how it goes with grants, and they are always going to be a competitive process. So I just want to kind of flag that. And then making sure you're planning beyond just one funding cycle. So particularly for projects that are hoping to be more long-term, consider how the project will be sustained if funding is reduced, delayed, or no longer available. A lot of times with grant funding, like you might receive partial funding compared to your total request. So making sure that you have a plan on different revenues to be able to support that, and then see grant funding as a bonus, like as if it comes out, plan for the grant, but don't depend on it, and don't I don't know. I used to get the advice from my aunt growing up that if I was buying something on my credit card, make sure that I could actually have cash in the bank to cover those costs before I spent that money. And I feel like with grants, kind of the same idea of, if you get it, it's a wonderful boost. It's an amazing thing, but just making sure that you're kind of, using all the different ways of getting different pieces of revenue to be able to support the work that you're doing. And what always makes me a bit nervous is when organizations have received funding year over year and then suddenly don't receive that funding, and then it feels like the rug has been pulled out of them, and that's not what we want for you. And also, it's not a good way for those programs to be maintained. Okay, now we're going to kind of go over adjudication and criteria. So this is sort of the behind the scenes. I feel like, especially with different grant programs that you apply to, a lot of the times it's sort of like the peek behind the curtain. You send off a grant application and you kind of have no idea what happens, who's evaluating it, how it works. So this is just to provide a little bit of background on the adjudication process, as well as talk about how those applications will be evaluated. So through the County Foundation, we assemble a team of adjudicators, a committee that are very knowledgeable about our local community. we always try to provide a variety of different perspectives. So looking at bringing together people that are really, really passionate about health in our community, maybe have like a really great expertise in that area, bringing on someone that's extremely passionate about the arts, that, is a great supporter of them, because you want to have a balanced committee. You want to have a committee that provides a variety of different perspectives and opinions, because ultimately it's that collective decision making that is an important part of this process and also what keeps it fair. So once the applications are provided to us, we provide them to the adjudicators, and they get kind of criteria to examine the applications through the lens of. So some of the pieces of criteria that they will look at is the alignment. So this is what I was talking about earlier about, does this application meet the objectives of the Huff Family Fund, and how will this benefit Prince Edward County? Obviously, a really key piece of this program. Community benefit. So what is the benefit to the community? What is it addressing a need? Is it able to provide long-term versus short-term impact? If it's awarded, will it last beyond just the life cycle of this particular grant? Or is it just something that will, be impactful for the next year, which is also fine. And is the request backed up with evidence and data? So this is where I would really encourage you to look at resources like the vital signs data that we provide, the reports. If you're unfamiliar, pecdata.ca is where you can find information from vital signs. And for those who may be unfamiliar, Vital Signs is a national data program that we participate in. I think ours is really good. Like, we're very lucky. We have an amazing, coordinator, Anne Van Black, who is our vital signs guru. And it is focused on a variety of different priority areas in which to examine our community well-being through. So it looks at demographic information, education, food security, transportation, health, all these different areas in our community to give a snapshot of what Prince Edward County's needs are and how things are trending. So it's a really, really valuable resource. And there may be other pieces of evidence and data that you choose to include as part of the application. But the reason that I stress that as an important part for this particular part of the criteria is that it helps to back up your request, particularly, with having been in this role since 2023 now. I can tell you that most applications I read, I look at it and I go, yeah, that's going to have benefit to the community. Like, that looks like a great idea. It looks like a great organization. It's very rare that I see a application that completely just does not fit at all. And so, this is just going to be another piece to help bolster and back up what you're requesting support for. Financial. So this is where we get into kind of the budget in the financial statements. So is the request reasonable? Do they have matching funds and or volunteer hours? So having that confirmation of the matching funds. And is there evidence of strong fiscal management? So that's what we're looking at when we look at the financial statements in particular. And that also feeds into the second part of this, which is organizational capacity. So can you deliver the project as outlined? And is it a detailed plan? Does it serve a cross-section of the county? And is the timeline reasonable? Now, no, that's, for kind of the first part is focused specifically on just that initial review of each application. So each application is first reviewed entirely based off of its own merits. And then part two of this is that there's the discussion around the merit to the other applications that we receive. And as part of this, I wanted to share kind of, here are some of the potential questions that we would ask adjudicators to think about when reviewing applications within the collective, because like, grant funds are never just awarded in a silo. It's always inherently comparative, based on the overall pool of applications and the range of ideas that are being presented. So I just wanted to kind of share here some examples of the questions that adjudicators would think about within that context. So looking at diversity of what is being supported. So it is, across sector support. So as I mentioned, that's looking at things like animal welfare, mental health and addiction, human services, arts, education, all of those different sectors that are able to be supported through the Huff Family Fund. And looking at, has it, been too specific in one particular area? Looking at the types of projects that are being proposed, if there's similarities between requests, and looking at, is it serving a cross section of Prince Edward County residents, or is it kind of very specific to one particular area? Like, is it only, Picton, or is it only Wellington, or have we funded projects that are going to serve like a part of the geography of the county? So those are just some examples of kind of the bird's eye view perspective that adjudicators would think about when it comes to evaluating applications. Does this initiative fill a gap in the community, or does this duplicate an existing service? So again, that's where that community knowledge piece comes in. We're familiar with the organizations that are operating here, that are providing services. And is this going to duplicate something that already kind of exists? Could we instead suggest that they partner with an organization that's doing something similar? Or does it fill an entirely new gap in the community of what's available here currently? Will the initiative create benefits that extend beyond the grant period? So this is what we talked about previously in terms of short-term impact versus long-term. Does the application stand out compared to others in terms of community impact, need, and readiness? So some applications will have a certain amount of urgency to them in terms of being able to respond to a current need. Readiness goes into having that detailed plan, and community impact, as we've spoken about already. Should this project be prioritized over other strong applications? Why? So again, thinking about that merit to other applications, as I mentioned, we're quite lucky in Prince Edward County. We have a lot of really, really amazing organizations here. Like, we're very lucky in that, like, I look at all the organizations we have here and I'm like, wow, like we are, yeah, pretty darn lucky. But that also means that there's challenges in being able to support projects with meaningful support. So sometimes projects do need to be prioritized over others. And again, that's also, where you get into the land of like, okay, making sure that you're not dependent on one particular stream of funding to be able to move forward. And lastly, would not funding this project represent a significant missed opportunity for the community? Again, just different things to think about. And the reality is that during an adjudication meetings, there's a variety of different opinions on, where people would choose to support different grant applications and who would choose differently. If I was awarded like the, sole task of, looking at all of the applications and determining where I would decide all the funds should go to all the different projects and organizations, I would have a entirely different perspective than someone else. And so that's why it's important to have that kind of diversity in who is participating in the committees. Okay. Now, timelines. So applications are due Friday, September 14th at 4 p.m. No late submissions will be accepted. I like to think that at the County Foundation, we do generally, provide some flexibility with our work where we like to be accessible. But it's our one hard and fast rule, which is applications cannot be submitted past the deadline. It simply isn't fair to those that submit on time. And it's also not fair to anyone else that previously has unfortunately missed a deadline and, comes knocking and we have to tell them, sorry, you've missed the deadline. We can't accept your application. If we turn around the next year and let someone else submit, then again, that's just not fair. So it's our one rule. So that's why, write this in your diary, double check, make sure it's all in there correctly. And again, this is why it's helpful also if you have that plan to submit a bit early, just again gives you that peace of mind. So applications can either be submitted online through our website, which is what we recommend, or we also have a PDF printable version, which can be emailed to info@thecountyfoundation.ca. In terms of timing of notifications, applicants will be notified on the outcome of their application in November 2026, with funding to follow to approved applicants by the end of the month. So it just gives you a little bit of perspective on when you will hear back. Okay, so that is a lot of me talking, but it is officially time for the Q&A portion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then if there are any particular questions, oh, I've just been notified. September 14th is a Monday. It is a Monday. Sorry, that is a mistake on my end. Thanks so much. Okay, so does anyone have any particular questions? My suggestion is maybe that, if there's things that are specific to your particular organization and your application, maybe we can touch base about that offline, but feel free, like if there's any burning questions or anything you need clarity on, then please let me know. You can raise your hand. You can pop it in the chat. Mm-hmm.
I can ask a question about recognition.
Yeah.
So we did receive a grant last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going through the process of the report and planning our application again for this year. And I was looking back at the recognition, and it's a little bit vague. So it says we're required to recognize the County Foundation and the Huff Family Fund, but it doesn't really say where in particular you'd like to see that happen. I know that last year we did include both names in our annual report donor list. Does that suffice, or do you want to see something more particular to the project?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Rachel. We we don't have like a strict guideline in terms of like you need to recognize us in this particular way. Like some government funders in particular, like they will say like you need to do a social media post and you need to have us listed on your website. We don't tend to do that. Who knows, maybe in the future we'll start to outline specifically like, okay, we need to be recognized in this way. But I think from our side, we're quite happy to have it be flexible, depending on the organization and how you choose to show your supporters. So my general rule of thumb would be like if it's related to a specific project, having us like anywhere that information is shared about that particular project, that would make sense. Listing us on your website, or if you have an annual report where you list your supporters, those are great spots. So those be kind of some suggestions, but really it's going to be dependent on your organization and kind of what you choose to do and what makes sense within your context. But always happy to chat about that if you ever want to have a little game plan.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, we're pretty flexible, but with the wide variety of grant levels that we
Mm-hmm.
receive, we want to make sure it's comparative. So
Yep.
the size of the grant from the Huff Fund is pretty different from a number of our other sized grants in both directions. So just trying to make sure everyone gets the relative recognition for the contribution.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as I mentioned, kind of what our hope is particularly with our donor funds, making sure that there's that connection between us and the donor fund. I think particularly as our donor funds have grown, which is amazing because we're able to offer supports through a variety of different methods. But it's really a great way for us to be introduced to other potential new donors that then allow us to be able to grant more to our community. So that's kind of our end goal with the recognition is being able to share that information and make sure that people can find us. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Right. Megan.
Hello.
Hi.
This is my first time applying for this grant on behalf of Baxter Arts Center. And so I just had a question around if I can apply for the grant and request funding for multiple projects or offerings or workshops, or does it have to be streamlined into one program, class, workshop?
Mhm. So we haven't put like it needs to be a specific thing, but my recommendation would be and suggestion is that I think particularly for committees that are reviewing a variety of different applications, just for their clarity and for their understanding, there's a benefit to selecting a particular maybe even grouping of projects with kind of similar things going on within them. But my heart says that probably you're positioning with your strongest foot forward if you're choosing a select focus for a particular application. Just again, in terms of that understanding, especially if you have 40 different projects listed under one application, that's going to be really, really hard for the adjudicators to keep all that in their brains. So that's my only suggestion there. But
Thank you.
no worries. Is there any other questions? I'll just mention, so my email, and I'll put it in the chat here, is g.armstrong@thecountyfoundation.ca. So if there's any questions that you think of later on, if you'd like to touch base on particular applications specific to your organization, please feel free to drop me a note, and we can always arrange a little chit chat because I always like to hear what you guys have going on as well. It's great for me. Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining for this past hour. I hope you enjoy the sun is shining beautifully outside. So be free and have a great rest of your day. Thanks much.
Thank you.